Hey, welcome to Kathy's Coffee House. As I promised in our last video, one of the things we plan on doing here at the coffee house is having interviews with musicians and other people who have found their superpower and how it's helped them to deal with trauma, stress, difficult situations, and so forth. My first guest today is a dear friend of mine, Jay Nisa. And she's the first person that I met at Soundspace, and I fell in love from that point on. You gave me such a wonderful tour, Jay.
Aww.
So welcome to the coffee house.
Hey, happy to be here.
Yeah, so you were really excited to come and share with us as our first interview official.
I'm honored, honestly.
Oh, well, we're delighted to have you, and we're very humbled because, you know, you're sharing your truth with us, and that's what we want to happen more around the world. Because as I'm sure you'll attest to, it does help you to heal, to put those words out in the universe and find that there are people that will lift you up. So.
Yeah, I think so many times when you go through something like, you know, the stories that we've both shared with each other, anything traumatic, it helps to have a vocabulary to understand your experiences by. So by sharing our stories with others, we're sharing not just our trauma, our past, what's happened, but we're sharing a way to cope and a way to move forward as well.
I like what you say, that the vocabulary, because there is a language that sort of transcends all the individual unique characteristics of whatever that traumatic thing or period of our life was, and that we actually share so much in common as a result of that, and how we've coped and how we move forward, or how we get stuck even as well. So we've talked about some of these things before, but let's go back to what you want to share about the experiences that you went through that you found traumatic. How far back do you want to go on that?
We could go back as far as it goes. I guess the earliest memory I have that something wasn't quite right is I would remember falling asleep at night and my ears would be tuned to my parents in the other room, and I would like be hanging on every word as my dad would be like not just yelling at my mom, but like just demeaning her in every way and doing all of the things that my mom told us not to do. So talking to my mom the way she would always tell us not to talk to others, and, you know, behaving in a way that didn't match up with the Christian values that my mom was trying to instill in us. So I would lay there feeling confused at the age of like 6 or 7 and just overhearing the disconnect between the way my dad was acting and the way my mom would present the relationship.
And then you said at around age 9, you started writing.
Yeah. So around the age of 9, I wrote my first song, and I was, like I said, raised really religiously. I was taught that you had to write about Jesus. So my songs from an early age focused on that, but I never found myself writing the same way that any of my peers were writing when it came to Jesus. I didn't have that loving father figure that, you know, often Jesus and the Lord are compared to.
Yeah,
so
that's a good
so my
point.
songs were more judgmental and were more feelings of inadequacy and feelings of like strain in that relationship. So whenever I wrote about things, they would focus on almost a hopelessness about how inadequate that I was to have a father figure.
Wow, that's craziness, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And so you were kind of looking at your father as that Jesus father type figure, and it wasn't matching up at all for you.
Exactly.
And you weren't the only one in your family. You have a sister, correct?
Yes.
Who's a year and a half younger, 2 years younger?
Yep, she's just under 2 years younger than I am. She and my mother were the main focus of my dad's aggression and just abuse. They struggled with their weight and things like that, and they both had just really sweet, outgoing, loving personalities, and my dad really tore them down for that. For both of those things, he saw obesity or even just not being perfect as a sign of weakness and as a sign of, honestly, evil. He felt that in those cases that you were inadequate.
And how do you live up to that when you are who you are and what you are?
Right. And my sister struggled with obesity from the time she was 6 or 7 years old. She was just always struggled with that. And I had the opposite thing. I always struggled with being underweight, but there were so many times growing up where my dad would use me as an example to my mom and to my sister of what we should look like.
Uh-oh. Did
Yeah.
that cause conflict between your mom and your sister and you?
It did, because I don't know, I felt like it's a hard thing to wrap your head around when you're put right in between your parents' relationship and it's a strained relationship and you're seeing your mom compared to you. That's a very weird dynamic, and it's not one I feel like any child should be put in.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, there were times when my dad would yell at my sister and tear her down from like a young age just because she was chubby. And he would say that other people didn't have to deal with what he was dealing with at home with that lazy wife and fat,
evil.
Yeah, and that we were the horrible ones because we were putting him through that.
Oh my gosh. That is so much to try to carry when you're a child. Did you feel like you needed to intervene for them, or that you could intervene for them, or?
Yeah, I mean, many times I did. I remember this one instance. It was a particularly bad day, but we had just gotten home from church, and my sister, like I said, super sweet. And she was probably, I want to say 7 years old at this time. Her stomach kept popping out of her shirt during the day, so she kept pulling it down. And we got home, and first thing that my dad said to her was that she was so fat it was enough to make a preacher curse, and that no one loves a fat girl, and that she needs to lose weight or no one's gonna ever love her.
Oh my
and
gosh.
Then he would turn to my mom and say it was all her fault, and that he was going to do the Lord's work with or without her, and that she could pack up her stuff and go back to her dad, that he was ashamed of her, all of this stuff. And I just sat there like completely frozen listening to all of this. Like I said, it was never directed at me. I was perfect. I looked the part, I acted the part, I was perfect. So
But
it was
underneath it, you were kind of coming up with your own version of what the world was about,
right.
weren't you?
I did speak up after he, went on about his thing, and when he made that comment that he was going to, do the Lord's work with or without my mother, and by extension, his family, I said, you're going to do it with her. You made that commitment. Like I said, I was almost 9 years old when I said this, when I stood up to him.
Very, very grown-up thing to do at 9.
At 9 years old, yeah. And he essentially, like, when I said that, he didn't get mad at me. He didn't yell at me or anything. He just said something to the effect of, well, I don't see how that I'm going to do it with her. I don't see how that she's going to follow the Lord.
So he really was engaging you in that conversation in his own mind of
right.
How he was rationalizing all of this.
Yeah, even at the age of 9, he, I think, respected me more than he respected his own partner.
Because why do you think that is?
Because I think he saw me as a reflection of himself.
Yeah, there you go, right? The narcissist.
Yeah, because I was the one that looked like him. I was the one that was more courageous and bold, and I think he saw the good traits of him and me. My mom would always say that I was just like her, and my dad would always say I was just like him. But whenever I did anything wrong, my mom would say I was just like my dad. My dad would say I was just like my mom.
You couldn't win either way.
Couldn't win for losing.
No, but it built up an inner strength in you to be an independent person.
Yes, absolutely.
And so by the time you were 14, though, things changed again.
Yes, so when I was 14, I started really wrapping my head around kind of how bad things were at home. My parents homeschooled us through high school, so we started getting really isolated from other peers, and even in church groups, my dad started to revoke our right to be part of church communities, for lack of a better term. He would get in his head because he wasn't well liked in the religious community in multiple denominations. His reputation preceded him as being just not a very pleasant person.
He couldn't seem to outrun that, could he?
Mm-mm. So it just became a thing where he, even if he was welcome in an environment, would talk himself out of being welcome. His own, I think, guilty conscience would prevent him from feeling comfortable anywhere. So that prohibited him from being able to be a part of many church communities, or if he was, it didn't last long.
And then that always translated into it was all of your fault.
Right.
Not his, that he wasn't getting what he wanted.
Right, or it was the preacher's fault, or it was the congregation's fault.
Always someone else.
It was always someone else. He had a Job complex or a prophet complex, called himself an evangelist of God, and that God had called him specifically to not bring lost souls to God, but to correct the actions of other preachers and to bring them closer to God's actual doctrine that he wanted people to follow.
So he knew more than all the preachers,
Yes.
too.
Yes.
Okay.
But there was always a false humility. He would always go into it really humble. He would like pull himself down and feel so burdened with the gospel that God had given him. And that if he was wrong, he would plead with other preachers. He's like, if you're wrong, tell me I'm wrong, And when they never came up with an argument he believed in. So basically, if no one bothered to confront him or correct him, he would just take it as, see, I'm right and you're all wrong and you're refusing to follow what I'm saying. He would flip like a light switch from that that humble act of
Openness
piety
or-
and all
yeah.
of that, and immediately would go into, no, I'm right, you're wrong, and God is against you because you won't follow the gospel that God has given me. Almost like a dictatorship.
Yeah, they kind of are their own dictators of their own world, right? Because they kind of create their own world.
Right.
Right. So at 14, this was going on, and you said this became, you entered a period of depression for the next 4 years.
Yes.
And do you think it was your age or just a new level of understanding? What do you think led you into that dark time?
Well, at 14, had considered running away from home. Like, I had thought of every possibility, when I could do it, how I could do it, what I could do if I got away, just because I could see no way out of my circumstance. Mm-hmm. And that feeling of being stuck in an abusive household with no peers and no community just was really overwhelming. I did talk myself out of leaving just for my little sister and my mother's sake, because I knew that if I felt that way, they were probably feeling the same way, and I couldn't imagine leaving them to fend for themselves. They relied on me a lot. I was kind of like a second mother to my little sister. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I was a first mother. Mm-hmm. She would tell me all the time, I hope my mom doesn't listen to this. She would tell me all the time that I was more of a mom than my mom was, because my mom and my sister just would butt heads all the time. They couldn't get along. They couldn't respect each other. They couldn't come to any kind of agreements. I was the only one that could kind of mediate. And it was the same way between my mom and my dad. I was the one that they would both go to separately to try to fix their relationship or fix anything. And
that's no place for a 14-year-old to be, right?
Right. It went not just in my family, but anytime I was around any kind of peer groups, in between the periods of my dad completely isolating us from other churches, when we did get a chance to be a part of a church for a month, 2 months, couple months, whatever the case may be, I would find myself playing that role of therapist for other adults in my community, for my youth pastors' wives, and for Sunday school teachers, anyone who, I guess, needed to vent. I was making myself available because I think subconsciously I'd been groomed to do so by the adults in my life.
Exactly. But you don't get a childhood when you're busy being a parent to all those people, do you?
Right, when you're a parent and a therapist.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So you went through a really dark period, and were you still writing songs at that time?
Yeah.
Did they change from the religious songs to something more personal?
They did. Around that age, my teenage years, I started kind of deciding for myself what the Bible said instead of what my parents were telling me the Bible said, which that's a big step when your dad genuinely believes he's the only one in your entire state that understands the Bible correctly. So to try to come up with your own views, it's a really tough act. In any religion, I feel like it can be a tough act. So anyway, just kind of building that ideology for myself, or the viewpoint for myself, I started writing songs about guys I had a crush on and life and what I was genuinely feeling, and a lot of really sad songs too.
Sure.
And songs about who I wish I could be, songs about what I wish life was like, and things I wish were different. And I still wrote songs about God, and again with my kind of weird outlook on on who God was, and my skewed version of God based on my own upbringing and my viewpoint. But yeah, it definitely did shift, and songwriting became a major outlet for me. Songwriting and poetry. When I was 15, I started a poetry blog, and to this point, my parents, my sister, no one had any idea I wrote. So I'd been writing for years, at that point, when I was 14, for 5 years, and I kept it such a secret because of how judgmental my family and...
You wanted to keep that for yourself. That was your healthy space, right?
It was my only safe space. Yeah. So I would keep it a secret. I'd hide a notebook under my bed. At one point, I had dozens, if not over 100, partially written songs in my teenage years, just hidden. And I wouldn't show them to anyone. But I had that anonymous Tumblr blog when I was 15, and that was really fun. So that was kind of funny. I got to express myself that way and connect with other people, again, anonymously, that related to my poetry. So
do you think that kind of was helping to lead you out of that depression that you were in?
It was, because one of the main things that my dad did do was try to isolate and keep us from forming real connections with people, because he wanted to undermine those connections and say that, they were wrong about life, or they were wrong about...
And keep the focus on him.
Right. So for me to have a community that was all my own, that he didn't even know about, no one in my family knew about, it was really good.
Did it feel scary kind of too?
I did have trust issues. I had a
Yeah.
really hard time relating to others. I had a hard time understanding that people could interact with you without ulterior motives or without needing something from you or, you know, without expecting something from you. So it was a lot to wrap my head around, just being able to put my art out there for no reason and get response for
But it feeds
no
you,
reason.
doesn't it?
It did, yeah.
It feeds you. And that, I'm sure, helped start to build your ability to, at 18, break away.
Yeah, actually, funny story, but my first job when I was 18, so my first like real job, was as a freelance writer. And I was able to get my first freelance writing gig through the poetry that I had been posting from the time I was 15. So it really did help me to forge my independence.
You got some affirmation
Right.
and validation. Your ideas aren't evil.
Right, and that writing, doing something for yourself, not just for God or
Right.
for someone else, that the purely selfish act of creating art for you
Yeah.
is not just worthless. Like
No.
it's beneficial for not just your mental health or catharsis or an outlet, but other people relate to it, and that connection and community that had been lacking. It was something that I was able to build for myself and for others.
And kind of at your own pace, too.
Right.
Which I think is important, because I know for me, I just really still, all these years later, believe in the baby steps approach, because I know that my limitation is that I can get overwhelmed too easily, and I want to do so much. But then all of a sudden, I start having the panic attacks because I'm putting myself out there more. I feel my own expectations. And
I mean, that's something, again, my parents not believing in doctors and psychologists and anything like that, and the isolation. I had had many panic attacks and nervous breakdowns that were just completely either disregarded or called attacks of the devil or any number of things. But I distinctly remember that one time I was in church and I had one and I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. I was crying. I was not reacting. I sat perfectly still for hours. And anyone that acknowledged me, that came over and started praying for me, you know, they were all just like, do you want to get baptized? Is this the Lord talking to you? You know, all of this. But really what had triggered it was on the way to church, we had passed a billboard that said, "Where will you go when you die?" And one of my dad's favorite things to do was to remind me that I had not received the Holy Spirit. So I was not saved, and that anything I do, I could die and go to hell because I wasn't saved. So when I got my driver's license, that was the first thing he did too, was say, you better be careful, you're not saved. You know, you could get into a car accident and die. So of course I had anxiety.
of course.
Of course I did.
Oh my gosh. I know. I mean, sometimes when you have a very normal reaction to a narcissist in particular who's being abusive to you in their multitude of ways, it's so easy to just think that that's, where do you go with that?
Right. And coupled with the church environment, it's a two-edged sword for sure, because I think narcissists thrive in an environment of ideology that has a bunch of people that will follow it willingly.
Yeah.
It's like a pre-built cult,
Yeah,
if they want to turn it that way. And I don't want to say that all religions are cults. I'm not insinuating that. But my dad approached it very much in that way, where everyone needs to be conforming and pretty much uniform in their beliefs and not allowing that space for a personal.
And if you're only
Yeah.
in that very small environment, then you have no way to sort of fact check
Right.
what's going on in that immediate environment.
Right.
Of yours.
And my dad knew that. And there was one particular instance where, because my dad was an evangelist and we did travel to churches, he would always be quick to explain to us why each church was wrong in their beliefs whenever we visited it. So, for instance, if we had a church experience and, you know, maybe me as a 11-year-old, I'm like, this church seems okay. Everyone seems happy and, you know, doing okay. They're singing their songs and all that. I don't see anything wrong here. But he would always, once we got in the car, he would always bring up, oh, did you see so-and-so? Did you see this? They're doing this. They can't believe they're doing this. How do they not know the Lord wants this? Blah, 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 blah.
And narcissists are very judgmental.
Right.
Because everything fits into is good for them or not good for them.
Right.
You know?
And if
Very bipolar.
Right. But there was a particular incident where we went to this church and it was more of a charismatic church, which I don't know if you're familiar with that terminology. Basically a more laid back, but still very close knit and believes in a personal walk with God and all of that. But many of them still believe in salvation as far as like being baptized and the Holy Spirit and stuff. Just a little more laid back. They don't have as many strict like modesty and clothing and behavioral standards as Pentecostal does.
So your dad never really accepted any of these other
No.
followings, but why would he ever have?
Right.
You know?
So we went to this one particular one, and he went in expecting to have so many things to nitpick about them and all of that, because he just knew they weren't walking with God. But we went in, and it was the best church environment that we had been in probably in our entire lives. Everyone was super loving. The community felt really comfortable. No one was acting judgmental. It was the best community that I feel like anyone in my family had been in. From the moment we walked in, we were just welcomed. And there was an altar call, and we were all praying and feeling just so comforted by that environment. But as soon as church was over, my dad told us to go sit in the car, and I could just tell by his actions that it was not going to be a good ride home, the way he was interacting with us. Now, while we were in the car, I was watching him, and he had a big fake smile on and was shaking hands with all the preachers and making nice and talking about what a wonderful service it was and all of this stuff. But as soon as he got in the car, he started telling my mom and us that we were the worst family there, and that our walk with God was the worst, and that God was not accepting us for how we were and all of that. And he brought up that he was the evangelist of God, and he can't believe that the evangelist of God's family would be the worst family in that church, and all of this stuff. And my mom tried to just speak up, you know, a little bit. She didn't even get a full sentence out, and he just full on slapped her in the face while we were driving down the road.
My guess is your dad was bringing up all of your inadequacies because he felt inadequate in that environment.
Absolutely.
I think that's something that you see across the board with a lot of narcissists. You almost learn that language that you were talking about, the signs that you know when he's blaming you for something, that that's really what's his issue in his mind at that moment. And that's sort of a lot of projection.
Right. And that projection is why even churches that he hadn't been run out of for being a complete a-hole, even the ones that were accepting him, he wouldn't accept them because of his own insecurities.
Yeah, I'm sure he wouldn't even understand how to live up to being accepted.
Right. The concept of being accepted was so foreign. The concept of loving someone despite inadequacy and despite a lack of perfection was foreign to him.
Yeah. Really admire you for just having the strength and courage to really understand that you know what you know and you're sticking to it. I mean, you're just a survivor. You are absolutely a survivor. For all the times you've been put in a victim kind of situation, you just keep coming out as a survivor, and I'm just so proud of you for that. That's a huge thing to grow yourself.
Well, I'm like a wild weed. You chop me down, I'm just like, oh,
just come back. I'm back.
My mom always tried to tell us to bloom where you're planted. And what she meant by that was no matter how bad the circumstances, you stay put and you shine and you be a flower no matter what. I took it as, okay, so if I can bloom here, then I can bloom 10 times as well over here in a healthy environment. So.
Yeah. Aren't you glad that you have that understanding?
Yeah.
So you feel very grateful for that.
I do.
Yeah. And you know that you're really not evil.
Yeah, that was a lot.
So you've written a song about your dad. Tell me about how that came to be.
So kind of in my, I don't know what you'd call it, exodus, I guess, from religion and from a codependent family environment, there were a lot of feelings that came up. A lot of feelings of sadness and anger and frustration, but I would say a lot of just anger came out because I was such a conservative, calm kid. I had to be the strong one that kept her cool while everyone else was going crazy, and I had to do that. So there was so much pent up real emotion that I wasn't allowed to express, wasn't allowed to feel. And so that started coming out in some like kind of angry music. This song is kind of not very angry. It's more just like honest. It's just telling it like it is, but I wrote it during that period, or started writing it, and it's evolved a couple times since. It's not a song I really see myself putting out as, you know, a full-on release, because I'm not in that same space that I was when I wrote it. And I feel like it served its purpose for me, but I think it would be good to share it in this context for maybe it would help other people. It's about no matter how bad that you want to make someone understand that what they did was wrong, or make a survivor understand that what someone did to them was wrong, you can't do that. You can't control someone else's feelings at all. So it's a song about letting go and just kind of having the final word.
Yay. Well, can we hear it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right. Well, we're going to take a short break to get ourselves all set up for this, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Coffee House. We're about to hear a song by Jay Nisa that she wrote called Dear Dad, and she's never played it for anyone before, and I feel very blessed that she's willing to share that with us here today. So take it away, Jay.
Mama said we should forgive and forget, but you just lied again, and I can't get over that. You say you're sorry just to have the final word, but it was never the final hurt. Well, all of your letters have been read, but I just couldn't get past what you said. It's too soon, dear Dad. I've gotten lost in my own head, thinking about the things I could have said to you, dear Dad. I'm not sorry, I don't have any regrets. I used to wish I could have made you understand, but you're not my problem now, and I'm not yours anymore. You thought you had the final word. Well, all of your letters have been read, but I just couldn't get past what you said. It's too soon, dear Dad. I've gotten lost in my own head, thinking about the things I should have said to you, dear Dad. All of your letters have been read, but I just couldn't get past what you said. It's too soon, dear Dad. Thank you.
Jay, thank you so much for sharing your song.
Yeah, of course.
I just feel really blessed that you feel comfortable enough to share your truth here today with us, and that it's going to be here for you always.
Yeah.
What does that mean for you?
Well, I really, in sharing that song today, wanted to have kind of like a cathartic moment for myself to kind of pass the baton on to the next generation of survivors to kind of know that there is a way out and it won't always be hopeless.
And for you, writing songs does that, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Writing songs gives you that outlet. It's like taking the part of your brain that's hurting, that doesn't quite understand what's going on, and putting it in an aquarium or under a microscope and looking at it from a outside perspective, analyzing it and being able to kind of come to terms with what it is.
It kind of shifts it from being something that's a painful memory to something that's a memory.
Yeah, something to learn from.
By learning something, you kind of are then able to jettison the rest of it.
Exactly.
That's what I find too with songwriting, and it's just like bricks off your shoulders when you have those moments and you've spoken something. For you, do you feel like when you've expressed yourself in that way that you kind of let that whole thing go?
I think it depends on how far along you are with your personal understanding of what you're going through. I think sometimes the song can definitely be a catalyst for that. I don't think it's ever over. You're always going to have parts of it, but absolutely a song is like a neat and tidy place where you can put all of the things that you're feeling and make sense of it and then send it off and hope it helps somebody else.
Yeah, I think that communication of it is the really important part, which is what we try to do here, is give people that safe space where they can have that experience and others can observe you having that experience and feel inspired by it, right?
Absolutely.
Because we know it's never an easy journey, but every little baby thing that we do that helps us take control of ourselves and be able to process things for ourselves without feeling all those judgments judgmental things that are thrown our way or had been thrown our way. It's a great release.
It's a great release. It's also a true self-care moment.
Yeah.
Because you're selfishly making something beautiful for you that you can relate to, that inspires you. And then the fact that it relates to other people is the biggest honor.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right? It's so nice when somebody says, I get that.
Right, yeah.
That's a great feeling and makes you want to just keep doing it, right? So now that you've spoken that about your dad, what is it that you want other people to take from that going forward?
That's a very good question. I think the biggest thing that I struggled with was, and I say it in the song, trying to, or wishing that I could make someone else understand why their actions hurt me. But you're not in charge of someone else's life experience. You're not in charge of their cognizance or their awareness, and you can't always make someone understand something. So the biggest part of healing for me was no longer wishing that I had the power to make someone understand how they hurt me or what they've been through, but instead being aware and like understanding my own power and moving past it and being able to be who I want to be despite that, not because of it, and honoring my own strength.
Wow, that's beautiful. I just love that. Jay, you picked an affirmation for us today. And I just feel like if we just share one of those every day, that it's a neat way to just have that one moment of self-care every day. This is the one that you picked, and it's about releasing the pain and retaining the memory, which I thought was fitting for your cathartic moment that you had about this topic. So the affirmation for today is, I release my painful feelings and reach out in love and understanding to others who are in pain now. I give thanks for my pain and for the lessons I learned from it. That's a great affirmation. I thank you so much for sharing with us today, Jay. I'm just so touched by your story and encouraged by your bravery and your creative nature and your just awesome survivorship. I'm so proud of you, and you're a great example for all of us. And thank you so much for sharing. Can I give you a hug? Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure to be here, Kathy.
All right, that's it. So next time on the Coffee House, we will have another interview. I got somebody up my sleeve we're working to talk to for next time. In the meantime, hit the subscribe, like, and notifications.
Follow us on Instagram.
Oh yeah, follow us on Instagram. Thank you. And Facebook, Kathy's Coffee House, Kathy Coffee Music on Instagram. And don't forget to smash the buttons. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Smash that like button.
Smash.
Smash it. I love that you say that. It's so cute.